It was a crayon drawing that started everything. Not a phone, not a receipt, not some dramatic confrontation at the wrong moment. A crayon drawing on a folded piece of construction paper that my 8-year-old daughter had made at school and stuffed into her backpack, along with a permission slip and half a granola bar, and which I found on a Tuesday evening when I was checking her bag for tomorrow's lunch money. The drawing showed 4 figures. I recognized them immediately. My daughter Lily has a specific visual vocabulary for our family, consistent across hundreds of drawings over years. Tall figure with glasses, me. Medium figure with curly hair, my wife, Rachel. Small figure with pigtails, Lily herself. The 4th figure I did not recognize. He was tall. He had brown hair rendered in careful parallel crayon strokes. He was standing next to Rachel, and his arm, Lily had drawn arms as simple lines extending from torsos, was touching Rachel's arm in a way that even in crayon, even at 8 years old's level of anatomical precision, read as deliberate contact. Beneath the figures, in Lily's careful printing, my family and Kevin. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the drawing for a long time. My name is Adrian Solis. I am 42 years old. I am a high school biology teacher in Portland, Oregon. I teach AP Biology in a freshman life sciences course, and I coach junior varsity soccer in the fall. I have been doing these things for 16 years. I am, by profession, someone who explains how living systems work, the mechanisms underneath the visible surface, the chemical and cellular logic beneath behavior. I was about to discover how completely I had failed to apply this logic to my own household. Rachel is 39. She runs a small event planning business from a home office, corporate functions, private celebrations, the occasional wedding. We have been married 11 years. We have Lily, who is 8, and a son named Marco, who is 5 and currently in the grip of a dinosaur obsession so comprehensive that he has begun correcting his preschool teachers on points of paleontology, which I find mostly wonderful. We live in a craftsman house in a quiet neighborhood where the neighbors know each other's names, and the elementary school is 6 blocks away, and life, from the outside and frequently from the inside, looks like exactly what it is supposed to look like. I put Lily's drawing on the kitchen counter. I made both children's lunches for the next day. I checked Marco's dinosaur library book for its due date. I said goodnight to both kids when Rachel put them to bed. And then I sat at the kitchen table with the drawing in front of me and waited for my wife to come downstairs, and I thought about the mechanisms underneath the visible surface and what it means when behavior stops matching the system you thought you understood. Kevin. I had never heard the name Kevin in 11 years of marriage. The crayon drawing is among the most emotionally precise discovery mechanisms across this entire story cycle. It arrives not as evidence, but as innocent testimony, a child's earnest effort to document her world as she experiences it. Lily has drawn her family, including Kevin, because Kevin is, in her direct experience, part of the landscape of her mother's life, and therefore worth including in a picture called My Family. She has no understanding of what this transmits. The arm contact detail, deliberate even in crayon, is the drawing's most revealing element. Lily has observed and recorded a physical proximity between her mother and this man that registered as noteworthy enough to represent Adrian's professional identity as a biology teacher, someone who explains the mechanisms beneath visible surface behavior, establishes the story's central irony immediately and completely. He teaches students how living systems actually work underneath their observable outputs. He has not been applying this diagnostic lens to his marriage. The drawing forces the application. Rachel came downstairs at 9:15, after the children were settled, carrying her laptop and the particular expression of someone planning to spend the evening catching up on administrative work. She saw the drawing on the table. Her step didn't falter, but something behind her eyes did, a barely perceptible internal adjustment, the kind of micro-recalibration that you only catch if you are already watching for it. Lily's getting good, she said, setting her laptop down. She drew that at school today? Apparently, I said. Who's Kevin? A half second. Kevin Marsh. He did the A/V setup for the Delacroix corporate retreat last month. Lily met him briefly at the venue when I brought her along. She opened her laptop. She must have liked him. Kids latch onto people. It was smooth, contextually complete. It answered the question and closed the subject simultaneously, the way a good lid seals a container. I nodded and said I figured it was something like that. I did not sleep well. Over the following weeks, I found myself doing what I had not done in 11 years of marriage, paying attention with a particular quality of focused awareness that I can only compare to what happens in a laboratory when a result comes back anomalous. You don't discard the data. You run the experiment again. You look more carefully at the methodology. I ran the experiment again. Rachel's work had always involved irregular hours. Events run late. Vendors cancel. Clients panic at 11 p.m. about floral arrangements. This was known and accepted and had been the texture of our life together for as long as she had been running the business. What I began to notice, now that I was paying attention, was a pattern within the irregularity. Wednesday evenings. Not every Wednesday, but a significant proportion. She would tell me she had a venue walkthrough, or a vendor meeting, or a client call that had run over. She'd come home between 8 and 9, sometimes closer to 10, in the particular mode of someone who has been on for several hours, slightly elevated, slightly tired in a specific way, the way you are after sustained social performance. I had read this, consistently, as the natural aftermath of client work. I began to read it differently. The second thing, Rachel had started going to a spinning class on Saturday mornings. This had begun in January. She'd mentioned it as a New Year's health initiative, which was plausible. She'd done similar things before. The class ran from 8 to 9. She was usually home by 9:45, sometimes 10. She came back flushed and genuinely sweaty, which I had taken as confirmation. Then, one Saturday in April, I drove past the studio where she said the class was held. At 8:20, the studio's lights were off. The studio was closed on Saturday mornings. It opened at 10. I drove home. I made pancakes. Lily helped and got batter on the ceiling somehow, a fact I found both annoying and impressive. Marco informed me that the Spinosaurus was larger than the T-Rex and that most people didn't know this. I agreed that most people didn't know this. I said nothing to Rachel when she came home. The third thing was smaller and came from Marco. He had been coloring at the kitchen table on a Friday afternoon, and without looking up from his work, with the distracted conversational mode of a 5-year-old who is 70% occupied with something else, he said, "Kevin has a really cool car." I looked at him. "Where did you see Kevin's car, buddy?" He shrugged, the vast, unconcerned shrug of a child who has already moved on to the next thought. "When Mommy picked me up from Sam's. Kevin was there. He has a blue car that's really shiny." He returned to his coloring. "An ankylosaurus," I noted. Careful, deliberate tail spikes. Kevin had been present at a school pickup. I went to the sink and ran the water and stood there for a moment. Kevin was not just a corporate event A/V technician. Kevin was someone who appeared at school pickups. Rachel's response to the drawing is a case study in practiced crisis management. She has an answer ready, contextually supported, emotionally calibrated, delivered without visible strain. The speed and completeness of the explanation suggests this is not an improvised response, but one she has carried in reserve, possibly for some time. This is consistent with affairs that have been running long enough to develop contingency narratives. The spinning studio detail is the section's most cleanly constructed evidence. The lights-off studio, the 10 o'clock opening, the consistent Saturday morning window. It converts the abstract suspicion into a specific, verifiable falsehood. Adrian's response, pancakes, ceiling batter, Spinosaurus, demonstrates the survival mechanism that appears across all these stories. The betrayed spouse, in the acute hours following confirmation of a lie, continues performing parenthood because parenthood is both duty and the only available anesthetic. Marco's car observation is the story's second child testimony piece, and it escalates the stakes significantly. Kevin is not a peripheral professional contact. He is someone present enough in Rachel's mobile life to be encountered at a school pickup, which means the overlap between the affair and the family's daily geography is closer than Rachel has managed it to appear. I am a scientist by training and by temperament. I believe in methodology. I believe in controlled variables and reproducible results and the discipline of not drawing conclusions before the data supports them. I also believe, having spent 16 years in high school classrooms, that there is a specific kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with methodology. The intelligence of a child who reads the emotional temperature of a room without trying to, the way a plant reads light, without having a theory of photosynthesis. I was using both. The methodological piece. I went back through our shared calendar for the year. Rachel maintained the family calendar with real conscientiousness. She was better than I was at keeping it updated, which was something I had always appreciated. I looked at the Wednesday evenings specifically. 14 of them in the past 4 months carried notations. Vendor call, venue walk, cascade meeting, florist consult. All plausible, all unfalsifiable at a glance. But the calendar also showed something else. On 6 of those Wednesdays, Rachel had input a location. Habit, probably. She pinned locations when driving to new venues. 3 of the 6 addresses were legitimate business locations I could verify. A catering company, an event venue downtown, a hotel ballroom she told me about. The other 3 pointed to a residential address in the Selwood neighborhood. South Portland, 25 minutes from our house. A neighborhood of old bungalows and coffee shops and the kind of streets where people have raised garden beds in the parking strip. I looked up the address on the county assessor's site. Kevin Marsh, owner since 3 years ago. I sat with my laptop in my home office, the room next to Rachel's home office, separated by a wall I had always found companionable, and I looked at his name on the county assessor's database and understood that the lid on the container was not as tight as it had appeared. I was not finished. I found Kevin Marsh professionally through a search that took less than 10 minutes. He was not, primarily, an A/V technician. He was a freelance event production consultant, a step above technical work, the kind of contractor who managed vendor coordination and logistics for large corporate events. He had a LinkedIn profile and a modest website and a list of clients that included, I noted, 2 of the corporate clients Rachel had worked with in the past 18 months. So, the professional connection was real. The Delacroix retreat explanation was technically true. He had done A/V work there, or something adjacent to it. But he had been doing something else on Wednesday evenings for at least 4 months. I found the spinning studio question easier to resolve than I expected. I called them on a Thursday morning from my classroom prep period, while the hallways were still empty. The Saturday morning schedule ran from 10 a.m., as the website showed. They had never had an 8 to 9 class. They had considered it, the woman on the phone said, but there wasn't demand. There had never been a class. I thanked her and hung up and sat in my empty classroom and looked at the periodic table on the wall and thought about Rachel waking up on Saturday mornings and putting on workout clothes that she would spend an hour somewhere else and before returning home genuinely sweaty. Genuinely, because she was exercising somewhere, or doing something physical enough to produce the physiological results she needed me to read as confirmation of the fiction. The care this required. The sustained, deliberate, daily renewed care. I was still in the territory of inference. I needed primary evidence. What I got instead was Lily. She came to me on a Sunday afternoon with her drawing notebook. She maintains a running, illustrated record of her life with the dedication of a journalist, and showed me the latest pages. A birthday party at a classmate's house. A trip to the zoo with my parents. A Wednesday afternoon, apparently, when Rachel had picked her up from school and taken her ice cream. In the ice cream drawing, Rachel, Lily, and Kevin, sitting at a table. Ice cream cones. Kevin had been given brown hair again, and a specific detail Lily had added, a blue car visible through the window of the ice cream shop, because Lily is the kind of artist who establishes setting. Lily, I said carefully, does Kevin come with you and Mom a lot? She considered this with the honest arithmetic of an 8-year-old. Sometimes, she said. He's nice. He knows a lot about dogs. Does Mom know you drew him? She shrugged. I draw everyone. This was true. She drew everyone. Did Mom say anything about me seeing the drawings? Another shrug. Pure, uncomplicated indifference to the political dimensions of her art practice. No. I looked at the blue car in the ice cream shop window. Kevin Marsh drove a blue car. He was present at school pickups and after-school ice cream. He knew a lot about dogs. He had been invited, implicitly or explicitly, into the peripheral geography of my children's lives. This had crossed a line I hadn't known was there until I felt it cross. The discovery of Kevin's home address through Rachel's own calendar location pinning habit is the story's neatest piece of irony. Her organizational conscientiousness, the quality Adrian has always appreciated, becomes the mechanism of her exposure. She has been meticulous in maintaining the family calendar, which is itself a performance of good partnership, while simultaneously using that same calendar to log visits to the man she's seeing. The two activities coexist in the same digital document, separated only by the assumption that Adrian never looks closely. Lily's second drawing, the ice cream scene with the blue car visible through the window, is the story's most emotionally escalating piece of child testimony. She is not reporting something she's been asked to report. She is simply practicing her craft, documenting her world with consistent fidelity. The detail that Kevin knows a lot about dogs suggests a warmth and ease in his interactions with the children that indicates he has been present enough to develop a relationship with them. Not just peripherally encountered, but engaged with, made comfortable for. This is the line Adrian identifies. The affair has moved from a private deviation into the emotional space his children inhabit. At this point, the investigation is no longer about confirming betrayal. It is about understanding the full scope of what has been built in the margins of his life. I took a personal day from school on a Wednesday in May. I told Rachel I had a dentist appointment and a curriculum review meeting that had been rescheduled to off-campus. Both were plausible. Neither was true. I was, in some sense, becoming fluent in the same language that had been used on me, constructing a fiction that would hold for the hours I needed. I drove to the Selwood neighborhood at 2 in the afternoon. I parked on a parallel street, walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks from Kevin Marsh's address, ordered something I didn't drink, and sat by the window with a book I didn't read. At 3:40, Rachel's car turned onto his street. She parked in front of his house. She got out carrying what appeared to be a tote bag, the reusable kind she always had, practical, environmentally correct. She walked to the front door with the ease of someone who has done this many times. The door opened before she knocked. I sat in the coffee shop for a long time. Long enough to finish something I wasn't drinking. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift across the table. Then I drove to the elementary school and picked up Lily. Then I went to Marco's preschool. Then I drove both children home and made dinner and helped with homework and read 2 chapters of a chapter book about a rabbit detective that Marco had recently and inexplicably become interested in. Rachel came home at 8:30. She said the venue walkthrough had run long, but the space was perfect for the Henderson event. She smelled of something I had learned not to analyze too specifically. She kissed both children and asked about their days and sat beside me on the couch and was, as she always was, present and warm and functionally, competently, lovingly there. I said nothing. I needed one more week. Not for more evidence. I had enough. I needed the week for myself. To sit inside what I knew and understand what I was going to do with it. My sister called me on Friday. Margot, 3 years older, the kind of person who asks real questions when she asks how you are. We talked on the phone most Fridays. It was a habit from years ago that had survived both our adult lives. You sound different, she said. Different how? Careful. Like you're moving around something. I told her I was fine. She let it sit for a moment and then said, Adrian, you know you can tell me if something is wrong. I know, I said. Are you and Rachel okay? The directness of it landed in a way I hadn't prepared for. I heard myself say, I don't think so, and then stop. She didn't push. She said, I'm here when you want to talk, whenever you're ready. And then we spoke about other things, the comfortable other things of siblings who have known each other their entire lives. And she let me leave the conversation without having explained anything, which was exactly what I needed. I found the final piece of evidence not through investigation, but through the specific carelessness that sustained deception eventually produces. Rachel had left her personal laptop open on the kitchen counter on a Saturday morning when she went to answer the door for a delivery. I was not looking at it. I was making coffee. The screen was visible from where I stood, and on it, in the email client she had opened, was a message from an address I didn't recognize, the preview line of which read, Thinking about you. Wednesday feels far away. The email was from Kevin. I turned back to the coffee maker. I had built a complete case. A biologist's case, if you want. Observation, hypothesis, repeated testing, consistent results. The hypothesis had been confirmed across multiple independent lines of evidence. I was ready for the next phase. Adrian's decision to take a personal day and go to Kevin's street represents the story's most morally complex investigative choice. He constructs a fiction to confirm a fiction, which he himself recognizes as a form of contamination. His self-awareness about becoming fluent in the same language reflects genuine intellectual honesty. He is not simply a victim executing necessary surveillance. He is a person who has had to partly compromise his own stated values in order to confirm what he already knows. The afternoon in the coffee shop, watching Rachel walk to Kevin's door, is handled with deliberate restraint. No dramatic emotion, no confrontation. He watches. He leaves. He picks up his children. This sequence, confirmation of betrayal immediately followed by school pickup, dinner, rabbit detective, is the story's most emotionally precise passage. The email preview is the final piece, and significantly it arrives not through investigation but through accident, the way so many of these discoveries ultimately do. The careful apparatus of deception, maintained for months, fails at last through an open laptop and a kitchen counter. The gap between the email's tenderness and Adrian's silent return to the coffee maker is the story's most controlled emotional moment. I arranged for Lily and Marco to spend Saturday night at my parents' house. My mother asked no questions. She is a woman who raised 3 children largely on instinct and loves her grandchildren with a comprehensive intensity that makes her, in practical terms, always available. She heard something in my voice when I called and said, "Bring them whenever you want. Stay as long as you need." Saturday evening. Rachel had no event that night. I had checked. She was home by 6, having spent the afternoon in a way I had stopped tracking. I had made dinner. Not performatively. I make dinner several nights a week. This was not unusual. Simple food. The kind of dinner that says this is an ordinary evening because I wanted the first part of the evening to be ordinary. I had learned, from watching how these conversations go, that beginning without warning produces more honest responses than beginning with a declared agenda. We ate. We talked about the week. She mentioned the Henderson event. I mentioned a student who'd done an exceptional lab report. We were good at conversation, Rachel and I. We had always been good at conversation. This was one of the things I had loved earliest about her and continued to love, and the fact that I could love it while sitting across from her knowing what I knew was one of the stranger experiences I have had. After dinner, I put the drawing on the table. Not the first one, not my family and Kevin from February. The ice cream one. The one with the blue car in the window. She looked at it. "I've been to Kevin Marsh's house," I said. "I know about the Wednesdays. I know the spinning studio doesn't have an 8 a.m. class and never has. I know about the Selwood address. I know his name is on the county assessor's database and he's owned that house for 3 years. I know you've been taking our children to meet him." I paused. "I'm not asking you to confirm any of that. I'm telling you what I know. What I want to know is what you want to tell me." Rachel had gone very still. Not frightened still, or not only that. More the stillness of someone who has been holding something heavy for a long time and has been told they can set it down. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I've been certain for about a month. I started suspecting in February." She nodded slowly. The drawing. The drawing." She looked at it for another moment. Then she looked at me. "I'm going to tell you everything," she said. "I want to do that. I owe you that." "Yes," I said. "You do." What came out over the next 2 hours was comprehensive and, in its way, honest. She had met Kevin 15 months ago through a mutual vendor contact, not at the Delacroix retreat. That had been a later and more convenient reframing. They had begun a professional relationship that had become personal over the winter and had been, since January, what she described in a measured way as serious. "Serious," I said. "Yes." "What does that mean to you?" She looked at the table. "It means I love him. I didn't plan to. I wasn't looking for it. But it happened, and I didn't stop it, and I don't know anymore if I could have." I waited. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you," she said. "Every week, I told myself I would tell you. Every week I didn't." She looked up. "I'm a coward. I know that. I told myself I was protecting the children, but I was protecting myself." "The children," I said. "Rachel. Lily has been drawing him for months. Marco told me about his blue car. They've been spending time with him." The expression on her face at this shifted into something more painful. Not guilt exactly, but recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has been telling themselves a story about containment and has just been shown how much the story was wrong. "I know," she said quietly. "I thought I was keeping it separate." "Nothing is separate when you have children," I said. "They're the most permeable membrane there is. They absorb everything." She didn't answer. There was nothing to answer with. We talked until 11. She told me what she thought had been missing. Not a criticism of specific behaviors, but something she described as a slow emotional drift, years of good functioning without deep connection, the way a house can be structurally sound and climatically inhospitable simultaneously. I listened. I tested her account against my memory of the years she was describing. I found partial confirmation and partial reframing, the way you always do when someone gives you their version of shared history. I did not yell. I did not perform devastation, though I felt it. I felt it the way you feel a cellular process, not as drama, but as deep, systemic change. The kind that happens below the level of visible behavior and alters everything anyway. What do you want? I said, near midnight. She looked at her hands. I think I want to be honest, she said. For the first time in a long time. I think I want to stop carrying this. That's what you want for yourself? I said. What do you want for us? A long pause. I don't think there is an us, she said. I think there has been, for a long time, two people being very good at the performance of an us. I think I've known that for longer than I've let myself know it. She looked at me. I think you might have known it too. I sat with this. I am a biologist. I know that organisms under stable conditions can maintain homeostasis for a very long time past the point when the underlying system is changed. They appear healthy. They function. They meet all surface indicators of viability. And then they don't. Okay, I said. It was not agreement. It was not forgiveness. It was the sound of a man who has confirmed a hypothesis he had been hoping was wrong, and who understands that the next phase of the experiment requires him to move forward. Adrian controls the information completely, laying out what he knows before asking what Rachel wants to tell him. This is not aggression, but precision. He is a scientist who does not leave room for the subject to reframe the data. Rachel's response, the stillness of someone setting down something heavy, is the confrontation's most psychologically revealing image. The relief of disclosure, after 15 months of sustained deception, is physiologically real. The neurological load of maintaining a double narrative is significant, and its removal is experienced as physical. Rachel's acknowledgement that involving the children was a failure of containment, that she told herself a story about separation that the children themselves disproved with their drawings and their observations, is the confrontation's most important moral moment. Adrian's rebuke, delivered without heat. Nothing is separate when you have children. They're the most permeable membrane there is. This is both biologically precise and emotionally exact. The final exchange, two people being good at the performance of an us, is the confrontation's deepest cut, and Rachel's suggestion that Adrian might also have known lands as the story's most uncomfortable claim because it has some validity. Adrian's okay is one of the most carefully chosen words in any of these stories. Not forgiveness, not agreement, but the scientist's acknowledgement that the result is in and the next phase must begin. We told the children in June, on a Sunday morning with pancakes and the particular quality of early summer light that comes in through the kitchen windows and makes everything look more forgiving than it is. We had practiced what to say, not scripted. We had never been script people, but aligned on the principles. That both of us loved them completely. That the change in living arrangements was about us and not about them. That Marco would still be able to see his dinosaur books at both houses. That Lily could draw wherever she was. Lily listened to everything we said with the focused attention of someone processing a complex document. Then she said, "Are you and Daddy going to be sad?" Rachel said, "For a while. But people can be sad and okay at the same time." Lily considered this. Like when the dinosaurs died, but then there were birds? I looked at her. Exactly like that. She seemed satisfied. She asked for more syrup. Marco, who had been listening with apparent complete disengagement, looked up from his Triceratops illustration and said, "I still get to see both of you, though?" "Every week," I said. "Okay." He returned to the Triceratops. I moved into a rental house in August, 2 miles away, close enough for the children to understand it as the same world, far enough for Rachel and me to build separate routines without constant proximity. The rental had a backyard that Marco immediately declared optimal for a vegetable garden, a project we began in September with more ambition than expertise. Lily started a new drawing series, 2 houses connected by a path. She labeled them with careful capitals. Dad's house, Mom's house. She drew herself and Marco on the path between them, moving in both directions, which I found so precisely right that I had it taped to the refrigerator within 20 minutes of her giving it to me. Rachel and Kevin Marsh are, as far as I know, still together. This information exists in my awareness in the way background radiation exists. Always present, not something I interact with directly, not particularly harmful at normal exposure levels. What I think about, more than I expected to, is the question of what I knew and when. Rachel said, that last night, that she thought I might have known for longer than I was admitting. I have been honest with myself about this. The answer is neither yes nor no. It is something more complicated, which is that I had known something was wrong without having a name for it. I had registered anomalies without running the experiment to identify their source. I had felt, on certain evenings, a kind of marital flatness that I attributed to the ordinary weather of a long relationship and did not investigate as a symptom. A biologist knows that unexplained symptoms are not the same as no symptoms. Homeostasis maintained past its proper endpoint is not health. It is the organism's last expenditure before change becomes unavoidable. I had been watching the organism maintain homeostasis and calling it health. This is not a condemnation of myself. It is an accurate diagnosis. I am teaching AP biology again this fall. We are starting the year, as I always do, with cellular respiration, the fundamental process by which organisms convert available energy into usable form, the mechanism that underlies almost everything else in living systems. I told my students on the first day, the most important thing you will learn in this course is not a fact. It is a habit. The habit of looking at what is actually there rather than what you expect to find. Of letting the result tell you what it means rather than deciding what it means and looking for results that confirm you. A student in the third row said, "Is that hard?" "Yes," I said. "It's the hardest thing there is." I meant it in both directions. Lily drew me a new picture last week. A tall figure with glasses, me, standing next to two smaller figures in a vegetable garden with extremely ambitious tomatoes. She had added, in the corner of the drawing with no explanation, a blue crayon sun that was larger than strictly necessary. I asked her why the sun was so big. She looked at the drawing and then at me with the serene confidence of an 8-year-old whose artistic decisions require no justification. "Because it's warm," she said, "and there's a lot of it." I taped it next to the two houses drawing on the refrigerator. I am 42 years old, and I am learning, for the second time, more carefully, with full awareness of what it costs to look away, to read what is actually there. The data has always been available. I am finally running the experiment honestly. The resolution earns its emotional weight through the consistent application of Adrian's scientific framework, not as clever metaphor, but as genuine epistemological practice. His final classroom statement, "The most important thing is the habit of looking at what is actually there rather than what you expect to find," is not a conclusion he has arrived at easily. It indicts his own past practice as much as Rachel's. The dinosaur and birds exchange with Lily is the story's most quietly luminous moment, a child accidentally articulating the deepest truth of extinction and adaptation, of how endings are always also transformations if the surviving forms can find their way forward. Marco's vegetable garden, begun with more ambition than expertise, is the story's emblem of imperfect, earnest new beginning. It will probably not produce perfect tomatoes. It will produce something. Lily's two houses drawing, with the path connecting them and both children moving in both directions, is the story's most visually complete emotional image. She has drawn the new geography of her family with acceptance and without grief, not because she doesn't feel the loss, but because she is, like all children given sufficient security, an instinctive adapter. The oversized blue crayon sun, because it's warm and there's a lot of it, closes the story on a note of unearned beauty that is exactly what earned beauty looks like when it comes from the right source. Across this complete story cycle, the children have been the most reliable narrators, the most honest witnesses, the most accurate instruments available. They drew what they saw. They reported what they heard. They asked what they needed to know. And in each case, the adults around them were the last to read the data correctly. The lesson, perhaps, is that honesty does not require sophistication. It requires only the willingness to draw what is actually there. Across the entire arc, the universal insight is that the clearest evidence of betrayal often arrives not through hidden phones or receipts, but through the innocent, unfiltered gaze of a child who simply draws what she sees. Lily's crayon rendering of My Family and Kevin, complete with the deliberate arm touch, functions as the story's perfect diagnostic tool, honest, unedited, and impossible to spin. Adrian, the biologist trained to read mechanisms beneath surfaces, discovers he had stopped applying that same rigorous observation to his own marriage. The narrative arc moves from quiet pride in a perfect family through methodical, almost laboratory-grade investigation to a confrontation that feels more like a peer-reviewed conclusion than a shouting match. Cumulative lessons are stark. Homeostasis maintained past its proper endpoint is not health. It is slow collapse. Children are the most permeable and accurate witnesses, and the habit of looking at what is actually there rather than what we expect is the hardest and most necessary skill in both science and love. Adrian's growth, from denial to calm acceptance, from shared house to two connected houses on Lily's drawings, shows how betrayal can dismantle a man yet rebuild him with clearer vision. The oversized blue crayon sun Lily adds at the end says everything. Warmth returns, larger than before, because someone finally chose to see the data honestly. The chapter of illusion ended with a child's drawing. Adrian's real life, honest, examined, and warm, began the moment he decided to read it correctly.